Border Patrol on horseback approaching Haitian migrants as they crossed onto the U.S. side of the river in Del Rio. The White House called the images horrific.
The U.S. border agents are using horses and whips to deter Haitian migrants from entering the United States of America. You heard me right.
Border Horse Patrol agents corralling human beings like animals
have been filmed chasing, grabbing, and whipping Haitian asylum seekers.
I'm pissed.
The border troops are carrying whips. They're beating up migrants and pushing them back into the river.
Where did they get whips from?
I'm unhappy, and I'm not just unhappy with the cowboys who were running down Haitians and using their reins to whip them.
Human beings should not be treated that way, and as we all know, it also evoked images of some of the worst moments of our history, where that kind of behavior has been used against the indigenous people of our country, has been used against African Americans during times of slavery.
The fact that we are dealing with mainly Black migrants and Black immigrants and asylum seekers at our border in this kind of way really speaks to the kind of racism, systematic racism.
What we witness takes us back hundreds of years. What we witnessed was worse than what we witnessed in slavery. Cowboys with their reins again whipping Black people, Haitians, into the water where they're scrambling and falling down.
To me, it does smack of a bygone era of slavery.
Images of Haitian migrants being hit with whips and other forms of physical violence is completely unacceptable.
The El Paso Times reported the agent had swung his whip and charged his horse at people trying to cross, shouting, "Let's go, get out now, back to Mexico."
It was horrible what to see, as you saw. To see people treated like they did, horses barely running them over, people being strapped.
One border agent was heard screaming obscenities at asylum seekers, including children.
And humanity is the American way, okay? I am not shocked by anything this country does to people of color.
And I want to know, in the first place, who's paying these cowboys to do this work? They've got to be gotten rid of.
Should we be looking at the budget of Department of Homeland Security? Because I was not aware that whips, people had that kind of equipment on them that they could use on humans.
It's outrageous.
I, too, was horrified by the images captured by photographers with respect to the activities of Border Patrol agents on horseback. We do not condone.
Is it the president's stance or the White House's stance that whoever these border agents are using what seems to be whips on migrants, that they would be fired or at least never be able to do that again?
Of course they should never be able to do it again. I don't know what the circumstances would be. It's obviously horrific, the footage.
What we did is we directed an immediate investigation of the events that were captured in the photographs and on video.
There needs to be consequence and accountability.
I promise you those people will pay.
The DHS secretary tweeted that the border agents involved in that encounter have been placed on administrative duties and they are not interacting with migrants.
The actions we are taking are swift and strong, and we will take further action as the facts adduced in the investigation compel.
The secretary also conveyed to civil rights leaders earlier this morning that we would no longer be using horses in Del Rio. So that is something, a policy change that has been made in response.
Fox News is still trying to excuse the actions of the Border Patrol agents who were caught on video earlier this week whipping, or at least attempting to whip, Haitian migrants trying to cross the U.S. border through the Rio Grande, and of course terrorizing them as well with their 2,000-pound horses that they were riding.
The whip was the symbol of America's bigotry, of racism and white supremacy, and now that symbol is back. Let me show you some pictures. These are not from the last century or from a medieval drama. They are from the Texas border on Monday. Democracy may be in America's DNA, but so is cruelty and racism.
Several headlines stated agents were holding whips and rounding up and chasing down migrants. Turns out DHS and the Border Patrol say they did not have whips.
Border Patrol doesn't have whips. And there's not a single law enforcement agency in the United States that has whips, because we don't live in the slave-holding South, and we also don't live in like 13th century Europe.
The photographer who took that picture, the infamous picture of the mounted Border Patrol agents in Del Rio, says he and his colleagues never saw agents whipping anyone, and the photos are being misconstrued.
There isn't a Border Patrol agent or law enforcement official here in Del Rio who isn't outraged by President Biden's statements that these agents will pay, or by Vice President Kamala Harris's statements comparing what happened here in Del Rio to slavery.
The reason that horses are used, in addition to being able to traverse up to 50 miles a day, is that they can traverse terrain that vehicles can't. So when people say, oh, just use ATVs, or why aren't we using cars, especially there in Texas, which the president would know if he actually went down to the border, there's a particular variety of cane that grows there that makes it totally inaccessible to anything but horseback.
Biden had said these Border Patrol agents will pay the price. How do you feel about that when you think about what they're saying? This is the president.
It's honestly heartbreaking to know that, we work for a outfit like this, that they ask us to do our job, and we do it to the best of our abilities, and then we get this kind of backlash.
Do you think it's dangerous that the administration is making these kind of comments to law enforcement officers?
Of course. They weren't asked to do anything other than their job, and there was no. I've looked at the videos and the pictures, and there was no. They weren't whipping the Haitians at all. I mean, if anything, they were just using the reins to either create distance from the Haitians. Some of them were grabbing at the horse reins and the bits. They were either using the reins to keep them away, or they were using the reins to drive the horses into the Haitians to move them off, because they were resisting the commands of the agents.
Have we seen any video so far of them actively taking the reins and smacking migrants with the reins? Has any of that video emerged and we've missed it? Okay, there was a whole article in USA Today about Border Patrol agents on horseback whipping Haitian immigrants. And then they had to issue a correction where they said, oh, well, the El Paso Times has updated story to reflect that it's reported had witnessed at least one Border Patrol agent on horseback swing his reins like a whip. Toward whom? The horse?
These networks, these people, had no interest in this story until they could create an acceptable villain in law enforcement. They didn't give two poops, and I said poop. I was going to say the other one, about the 12,000 refugees that were there. But, they discover a Twitter image in their doom scrolling, and it looks like a whip. And so they go full Covington, right? Chris Cuomo, Yamiki April, all these other bozos who pretend to be journalists, then pretend to have a story. Do you know that if the Democrats and the media had cared enough about this crisis from the time that we started covering it months ago and then weeks ago with this actual story would not exist. It wouldn't be necessary for guys to be on horses to help control the crowd. So when I say they're pulling a Covington, I mean this. They could not use the striking video that has been coming from Fox, from the drones and from the helicopters, because you cannot manipulate that image. Those images are real. It tells the whole story. But you can take one disturbing image, right? One disturbing image, and you can turn it and manufacture a narrative that is to your liking. These lazy hacks ignored the stark footage that had been coming out, and then suddenly they are outraged. We must reject these fools. They're disgusting.